Okay, in this presentation I want to show a little bit about creative developer tools, and I'll be using my SizeLabels extend script, but seeing from a developer standpoint, so how I converted it from a standalone extend script into something that is wrapped into creative developer tools. So I'll start out by showing my current folder for the SizeLabels project. So in the SizeLabel project, I have essentially my JavaScript. Here, SizeLabels main is what used to be my standalone extend script. So, but I've renamed it to a slightly different name because I added a little wrapper around it called SizeLabels. So SizeLabels main is pretty much my original script as it was. So like just an extend script people could install into their scripts panel and run, but with a little bit of additions. So the main core of the script is the same, but there are some additional features that I added to it. So there's also a bunch of constants which are like passwords to handle the encryption of the source code. I won't show those on screen, but those are contained within a separate little file. And then there's also a little wrapper file, SizeLabels.jsx, which is a new wrapper file that I added to the project, which essentially loads the creative developer tools and then uses some specific function in creative developer tools called eval script. So eval script is pretty much similar to eval file or eval or all the kinds of evals we have in extend script, but with the difference that it also handles things like the encryption. So like essentially this is a little bit like JSX bin, where you would like check if the JSX bin file is there, you run the JSX bin, otherwise you run the JSX. This will look if the encrypted file is available, and if it is, it will run an encrypted file, otherwise it will run the source code file. And then after everything is loaded, it will just call the main function, which is essentially contained within SizeLabels main, which is just standard extend script that provides the functionality. So the way everything is set up is that you can, during development, you just have a standard extend script project, you run it with the VS Code debugger and so on. So everything is as normal. It's only once you package it and create a package file that the encryption and so on comes into play. So what I'll do is I'll first show you the project, how it runs from InDesign. So I normally have InDesign running already. So, and what I can do is just bring up my scripts panel. And then in the scripts panel, I've currently, if I just do reveal and finder, see like I have an alias essentially to the SizeLabels project. So this alias here, SizeLabels, points to this folder that we see here on disk. So it's just a link. So that allows me to test and debug the project as usual. So no encryption has happened. Everything is just plain source code and it can run. Eval script boils down to a standard eval file. So that's it automatically comes down to an eval file. Okay, to run it, I can just show like there's two main programs that are part of the product that I want my end users to see. One is called copy sample file with documentation to desktop, and that is something very simple. So all it does is it looks for a file that is included in the delivery. So the zip file or the package file that the user gets has that IDML file. And this little script will just copy that IDML file and save it as an INDD file on the user's desktop. That's all it does. So the whole idea is giving the user something they can start playing with and start looking at, and also giving them examples of how things are configured. So I'll run this script now. So it just tells the user that the file has been saved to the desktop and just gives them a few frames on the page. And one of the new features that I added into SizeLabels is to use an INI configuration. So the whole idea is that the configuration is something that if you want to do user interface for configuration, that is actually quite hard and expensive, a lot of fiddly work. So, and as I'm naturally lazy, I figured, well, why not put the configuration in the document on the pasteboard as something more or less readable. This could have been JSON, but I don't like JSON all that much because it's actually quite fiddly and easy to break. So if you remove one of those curly braces, it breaks. So the INI format, as it was used in Windows a long time ago, is actually very resilient and very lenient. And I've actually taken that leniency a little bit further. So essentially you can add in comments, so you can have any text in here, and if the text is not INI-like, it will just be ignored. So an INI has square brackets around section names, so this is a section size label configuration. I've made it so that here those pound signs signify comments, but you might even not have them because anything that is not properly formatted will be ignored. So even without those pound signs, it will still work. So, and the rhythm of the data is a section name, and then it has something equals something, something equals something, something equals something. And this is very lenient in that, for example, it ignores anything that's not a letter or a digit. So internally in the scripts, it will look for don't label frames below width as one string without spaces, without quotes, anything. So just, and it also converts it to lowercase. So it's not case sensitive, it's not space sensitive, it's insensitive to most things, only letters and digits. And then what's here behind the equal sign is either something, and then leading and trailing spaces will just be removed, or you can quote it. So if you need spaces in whatever you want to put into that value, then you just need quotes. And here you can see there's a mix of curly quotes. That's all fine. So the INI interpreter in Creative Developer Tools ignores the differences between curly quotes. So it accepts all kinds of quotes, and it will properly interpret it. So the whole idea being that the user has to take a little bit of care, but not too much, and doesn't get caught out with silly things like, oh, you added some curly quotes in my JSON file. So this is much more lenient than JSON. The other advantage is that it is very readable, so you can immediately see what the settings are. You, as a user, you're alerted to the fact that this is a file that uses size labels. B, you can see what the size labels configuration is. So, and if you want to know more about size labels, you can go and read the web page of it. But you can simply run it. So I'll just double click size labels, and then the thing adds labels, and you can configure all kinds of things with the labels. So that's all handled in a separate little video. I'm not going to go into that. So the main thing is, this is a script. It uses INI info on the pasteboard or anywhere else. You can debug it with a standard VS Code extend script debugger, so just a standard extend script, and then you create your script as nicely as you want, and then once you're done, you can go start thinking about packaging. Now packaging is done with a manifest file. So again, this thing is fairly lenient in that the only thing that's required is that the manifest file has a JSON file name extension. And when packaging from the plugin installer, all I need to do is pick the folder. So I'll target the folder, and the code will automatically go through all the JSON files it finds on the top level, and will look for one that has the proper data inside before it will interpret it as a manifest. So the idea is that you could have a single source code base with multiple manifests, and different manifests might be different versions of your program. So you might have a single set of source code files, and you might have a super version of size labels and an other language version of size labels, or all kinds of things. So there could be multiple manifests in that folder, and when packaging, the plugin installer knows which manifest to pick based on what the product is that you're actually packaging. So here, this is one of the key informations, product code. So this manifest is for the product called size labels. So there might be another product in the same folder called size labels ++ or something. The manifest also tells you the code what the version is. And then it can list targets, and this thing targets is an array of entries, and currently there's not too many types of entries. So there's a copying, there's a linking, and there is something called stub script in InDesign scripts panel. As time goes, I'll add more of those. There'll be like a ZXP or CEP or Illustrator or whatever. So there will be other methods to install into a target. So as time goes, I'm providing more and more targets. And my first, let's say, low-hanging fruit was to handle InDesign. And one of the methods is to stub a script in the InDesign scripts panel. So in this case, I'm telling the manifest, hey, I want to stub a script. And there's actually two scripts that needs to be stubbed, SizeLabels and the copy script. So which is the script that the user can use to copy some stuff to the desktop. And the other script is the actual script that does the work. So these two need to be stubbed in the InDesign scripts panel. We'll see what that means soon, stubbing. Then the next thing is telling the plugin installer what we want in the final package. Not everything that we see in this source code folder needs to go into the final package. Only some stuff. So in this case, I'm telling it, okay, by default, we will take all the things that have a JSX file name extension, we will sign them and we will encrypt them. So the signing will use the developer accounts, that is the developer doing the packaging. So the developer has a private and a public key, and those keys will be used for signing. Secondly, it will also encrypt, which means in the final package, the code will be encrypted as a replacement of JSX bin. So JSX bin is essentially quite a light encryption. So the encryption used by creative developer tools is AES 256, and it will use a developer defined password to do the encryption. So then there are some files that I want to be signed but not encrypted. So those files are essentially the JSX files that I will use for stubbing. So they need to be readable. They can't be encrypted because they're kind of the starting point. So it's like, don't paint yourself in the corner, or don't encrypt the file that you need to use to start the run. So which means the JSX labels here, SizeLabels.jsx, this file won't be encrypted, because if I encrypt it, I can't start. So chicken and egg. So the other thing it says is the copy sample file is also not encrypted. That gets put into plain text into the... it is still signed, but not encrypted. Then the INDD file, and that's actually a mistake. That should be IDML. So the INDML file needs to be signed, but not encrypted. Then the README signed but not encrypted. The JSON.js, which is the standard Douglas Crockford JSON that we use quite often with ExtendScript, sign it but don't encrypt it. And then there's also a file here, this Creative Developer Tools ES nzip. So that also sign it but don't encrypt it. Now, you see two entries here. So Creative Developer Tools ES is a folder, and that's the actual Creative Developer Tools that I'm using. So when I'm debugging, when I'm developing, and so on, I need to have access to those so my scripts can use them. But this thing is not included in the package. So there's no point in moving that into the package, and that's what you see here. Creative Developer Tools ES, just the name, omit. It's not put into the package. So what is put into the package is an nzip file, and an nzip file is just a zip file, but it's a zip file that is created on a Mac, which means essentially all I do is take this folder here, Creative Developer Tools ES, which has a whole lot of versions of the dynamic linked library, and zip it, but maintaining Apple attributes. So which means it's a zip file that will work on Mac and on Windows. You cannot create that kind of zip file on a Windows machine. So, and this nzip tells the plugin installer, yeah, just unzip it, but unzip it properly, which means on Windows it will just use the standard unzip, but on Mac it will use the operating system unzip. So it will actually run a command line unzipper to make sure we retain all the Apple specific things in there. So the plugin installer has no code to actually handle Mac specific stuff, and we just use the standard operating system things. And this whole spiel with this n-zip rather than zip is to allow me to carry those Mac specific attributes across properly. And that's what happens here. So essentially the nzip is put into the package. The uncompressed folder is not put into the package. Then what you'll see is when we start packaging, the actual packaged result will also end up in the SizeLabels folder, and we do not want to repackage the package. So the package itself should be omitted from the package. And then I also have some helper scripts here under developer. There's some stuff that is as a helper script. So that is to be omitted. And then I also have, I forgot what this was. Something else that needs to be omitted. Yeah, I forgot what it is. Not important now. All right, so this manifest allows me to instruct a plugin installer how to create a package. And in the future, there will be more methods. There will be methods for CEP, there will be methods for UXP, there will be methods for all kinds of things. All right, so the actual packaging then looks like this. So I need to launch the plugin installer. And there it is. Okay, so the plugin installer has two modes because it's actually targeting two totally different users. On one hand, we're just targeting the end user, and for the end user, it is just an installer and also a manager for their licenses. But for the developer, it is essentially a tool to manage your products. See, for example, here I have my products, and I have lots of them. So, and SizeLabels is one of my products. So I created, as a developer, I created an entry for my SizeLabels product. So that product gets a unique GUID, it has a product name, a product, there's marketing info, there's a description, and so on and so on. There's also license info, which I won't show because it has passwords in there that you need to decrypt SizeLabels, so they're meant to remain secret. But when you create your own product, you just would click new and create a new product. So say my products, and then you give it a name, my products. That might be just something, a longer name. This is a, this product code is a SKU, like a, essentially the product that you use for sales, the product code that's in your catalogs. So you might have multiple products based on the same source code with different attributes, for example, a longer license term, or more seats, or more throughput, or more functionality, specific functionality that is enabled or not enabled, depending on what product people buy. So you could have the same source code result in multiple products, and then they would all have a different product code. So you have marketing info, you have, for example, a URL where people can go to read about the product, you have an email to email about the product. This is currently not finished yet, but eventually you'll have a URL that you could use for automated order acceptance, so that people from their plugin installer could order your product straight from there. There is also a room for a download URL where people can go to download it. They might either use packaging and use the plugin installer to do everything, downloads included, or you might have an all-time physical download where people click on a link and download a zip. You have a product description, and then here the license info, that's stuff that you can only fill in once. So once the product is created, you can't change this anymore. So for example, there might be, there should be a capability code, and quite often that capability code will be the same as your product code. So the capability code is kind of a symbolic representation of the features that your user will be allowed to use. See, and then there might be, for example, my product here as a capability code, and I might have here my product 6 months and my product 12 months. as two different product codes that actually have the same capabilities, but they have a different duration of the license terms. So this allows me to have all those products all have the same capability. A revoke code is a special code that you randomly generate and that you use to eventually revoke licenses you have issued and that are to be voided. So for example, if you have a customer that should pay but doesn't pay, you can revoke those licenses and make them inoperative. The encryption key is a key you use to encrypt your code, so then the source code will be encrypted using that key. You also get a unique GUID for the issuer. That's only shown once you essentially create the product. And then here you can put some data, and this is essentially secret data. So, and typically I put some JSON in there, and that data is data that will become accessible to your source code on the user's computer once they have a valid license activated. So if the license is not activated or invalid, they will not be able to access that data. So the idea is that you might provide your code as it runs on that user's computer with some data, and that data is only available to your program if there's a valid license. Another thing you can do is set a lifetime for the license. So typically by default I set them to 1 year, but you can also use 5 days or whatever, 20 days or something for trial license. So you could create product codes for trial versions. And then this is an important one, the reassign delay. So the activation system of creative developer tools is somewhat similar to the activation system that Adobe uses for their Creative Cloud, but it's more, let's say, it's more flexible in that the way it works is you could have a multi-seat license, and those seats will automatically slosh around within a company. So somebody might buy 20 seats of you, and they might actually have 40 users. So those 40 users can just use those 20 seats, and as long as no more than 20 of them concurrently use the program, that will be fine. As soon as there are more than 20, then some users will be cut off from the functionality. And the reassign delay has to do with how quickly can a license be reassigned after it's been used by a user. So for example, say like I have a 2-seater and 3 users want to use it and 2 users are using it, and then it will take 600 seconds before the 3rd user can start using it after the 2nd user stopped using it. So this is the minimum time after being used that the next user can pick up that seat. So, but it's quite transparent. So for example, for JSX get URL, the get URL feature that I have for ExtendScript, that is used by companies that actually take out a license for 20 seats, and those seats automatically get redistributed amongst their users as they use it. But as soon as they have too many users will be cut out for 10 minutes at a time if they don't have enough seats. Another thing is the allow sublicense. So for JSX get URL, for example, I have clicked allow sublicense, and the idea is there that adds a feature to the product where a purchaser can then embed those licenses within their source code. So that means somebody who takes out a 10-seat license for JSX get URL can then embed those 10 seats within the source code that they use to use JSX get URL, so that they can then distribute that source code to anybody who needs it, and they automatically have the license included. And so depending on how many seats they took, so those seats will automatically be reassigned. So sublicensing is for people that create toolkits. So you typically wouldn't use this for scripts. ExtendScript, you don't really need to sublicense it because you typically won't package that within another product. But things like JSX get URL, which is a tool, a library that you use in another ExtendScript, you do need things like sublicensing. Okay, so let's go back to size labels. So size labels, I need to cancel size labels. Okay, so now this product entry defines size labels with all the info, and all I need to do is say package and then go find that size labels folder. So based on the code, the product code, so this product is called size labels. So if I pick the folder, it will automatically find the JSON file that also has the same product code in it. So I might have 5 manifests there, all with different product codes, and the plugin installer will know which manifest to pick based on the product code. Okay, so now all I need to do is say open, and see, like, very quick, but here now there's now a TPKG file, a package file. So this is a file format specific to a plugin installer. Now TPKG is interesting in a number of ways. First of all, it's text, so it's pure text. It's essentially it's zipped and so on, but then converted base 64. So it's a little bit larger than it ought to be, but it is pure text, which means it's quite resilient when people download it through things that might actually mismanage text. The second thing is that the important data is on the first line as a line. So which means if you have this thing sitting on a server, the client that will download this can actually query and just download the beginning of the file. There's no need to download the whole file. You can actually make like a page with a catalog, and you only need to download the first line. So which allows you to be more efficient rather than to have to download the whole file to know what the file is about. So for example, if I wanted to show on my web server what the version is of each of those downloads, it could actually access the file and get out the version number. And so on my web server, I actually have this file as a download file, but I also have a symbolic link SizeLabels.tpkg to this. So my download link is always stable. It's always SizeLabels.tpkg, and any program that needs to download and uses that link could actually figure out what the version is by downloading just the beginning of the file. So this TPKG file can then be uploaded to your web server, and then now we're going to switch over. So essentially at the moment I'm carrying my developer hat. I created a package, I then upload that package to my server, and then the end user, I'll save that, the end user is now ready to try that out and use that thing. So what I'll do is I won't save this, I'll take this away, and then I'll take this away. So now I'm not a developer anymore, I'm an end user, which means the plugin installer will typically be in standard mode. Okay, so the end user might start out by browsing the store for software. So, and they see this, and they see size labels for InDesign. If they click this, I will actually pull the data for size labels into my plugin installer. I won't download it yet. It's just the metadata for size labels. So I think it's actually already listed, but so what really would happen is if I delete this as an end user, so there's currently no size labels, but I'm interested in size labels, so I go to the Rorico product catalog and double click it, and now size labels is on my list of local products that I could order or could download. So the next step is here I have the TPKG file, and as I said, this is actually linked to that SizeLabels103.tpkg. And currently there's nothing here, the install target is empty. The user can now click download, which essentially downloads the TPKG from the web server. At the bottom here it says download started, please wait. Boom, and now it's done. So it has been downloaded, and you see now I suddenly have install targets. Now what happened behind the screens is the download also looked at the code signing. So when it's downloaded, it will verify that the code signing is correct and that this product is meant to be from Rorohiko. It will verify that against the Rorohiko public key and make sure this TPKG file is actually correctly signed by Rorohiko, which happened when we clicked the package when we had our developer hat on. So now, as a user, I can be sure that this SizeLabels things is actually from Rorohiko. And then here you can see that it has figured out that I have 2 versions of InDesign on my computer. So it actually offers me to install in either. If you have multiple language versions, it will also show them, so it's very straightforward. Now what I will do now is go into InDesign and bring up the scripts panel again. And then reveal that in the Finder. So currently there's nothing in the scripts panel, as you can see. See, and when the user here clicks install, it immediately plunks those 2 stub files. So you remember the stubs? We were talking about stubs. These are 2 stub files. See, they're very, very small. And if the user clicks uninstall, they're disappearing again. So installing and uninstalling is very straightforward. Plus, because we're using stub files, we don't clutter that scripts panel. So on the scripts panel, all we see is the size labels with 2 entries. So the copy and the actual size label. So the user can then double click and it actually gives me a copy file. And then the user can double click here and it will actually run the size labels. Now we'll look at the SizeLabels source code soon, and I'll show you some things we haven't seen happen here because I've run through this scenario before. But normally at the start of the day, the first time of that day that the user runs SizeLabels, a dialog will appear and say like, okay, you have 15 more days to try out the pro features, or 14 more days, 13 more days. So SizeLabels uses the Creative Developer Tools features to actually figure out that we're in trial mode or whether we're fully licensed, how long the trial is still going to last, and so on. And depending on, it will bring up dialogues, but it will only do so once a day to not annoy the user. So there is an initial dialog that only appears once when the user installs SizeLabels. And then there's a daily dialog to tell them, hey, you still got so many days in your trial period. So this is just an experiment. I want to see if I can maybe earn some money with scripts and selling like really low cost licenses to script. And made the script useful, but more useful with the optional features. And the other hope I have is that maybe I can get some impulse sales where people go like, oh, I'm tired of this. I'll just pay $4. It's just a coffee and I'll get some extra features. Right, so now I want to, this all works fine, so now I want to look at how those stubs look. So I'll just open them up. I should have done Sublime, doesn't matter. See, those stubs are generated by plugin installer, and all they do is just put in some includes and just reach out to some private folder within their library folder or app data where the actual scripts are stored. See, so the stubs are nothing but placeholders that immediately forward the execution to stuff that is stored in a managed folder, the folder managed by plugin installer. So we'll go to that folder now so we can show you what is in there. Okay, so there is a net.tightener folder in which there's lots and lots of stuff. But in this case, we're interested in the packages. See, packages is where those TPKG files end up. So before the file ends up here, the plugin installer will determine who the issuer is, and this is a GUID that represents me as the developer. So every developer will have a different code here, and then underneath that developer folder are the individual products by that developer. In this case, I only installed SizeLabels 103, and these are the actual scripts. So SizeLabels.jsx and Now these scripts came here in signed, they were essentially code signed, and the plugin installer verified the signatures and then removed the signature wrapping from around them so that they're not encumbered by signatures anymore, but they have been verified. So but that phase, verifying of signatures, is done during the installation. So download, essentially when I download it. So once it's downloaded, you see this is just a JSX. This is also just a JSX. That means they are plain extend script files. So you can just open them with a text editor, and they are just the standard, the same files they were on the developer's workstation. However, these other ones here, eJSX, are encrypted JSX. So, and if you just open them, they're just gobbledygook. So, and they're essentially base 64 AES 256 encrypted source code. So they are, and they are current. So now if you look at SizeLabels.jsx again, you see here, this is where the eval script comes into play. So eval script then has access to the necessary data to decrypt those files on the fly and run them. So that's why this is written with eval script. So on the developer's computer, eval script will just use the standard text or real text stuff, but on the user's computer it will decrypt and then run. And the decryption and running is done in memory. So these things are never decrypted to a disk. They're only decrypted in memory. Right, the JSON you see is also not encrypted, so that's what we asked in the manifest. So the manifest is also there, the README is there, and that's it. So all that other stuff is not there. Now note, we also have Creative Developer Tools ES, so that nzip file that we had has been converted to a folder. So this Creative Developer Tools ES folder here is the result of the unzipping of the nzip file. So remember, in the original SizeLabels folder on the developer's workstation, we had in Creative Developer Tools nzip file, and we also had a folder. That folder was not included, but the nzip file was included, and that will be unzipped on the user's computer using the operating system unzipper, which means on Mac it will unzip correctly with all the aliases and links and whatever other Mac attributes there might be. And that makes it accessible and usable. Right, so now there is more interesting stuff. So if we now go back to wearing our developer hats, so we've seen encryption and so on in action, and we go look at the source code and also look at some more features. So I'll just start closing stuff that we don't need at the moment. Don't save. Don't need a plugin installer. And now let's go back to SizeLabels. If you note, there is a developer folder, and in that developer folder the packaging actually created this file as well. So this file is a file with tracking GUIDs. So each time the SizeLabels is downloaded and installed by a user somewhere, there is actually a record of the fact that it was installed. So, and essentially the installation is anonymous, but it does know a GUID for the machine on which that product was installed. So I can keep count of how many unique installations of SizeLabels there are. I don't know who, but I do know the amount. So I know how many people installed SizeLabels. The second thing it keeps track of is each time SizeLabels is decrypted. So when a user starts SizeLabels and runs it, there is a decryption operation. That decryption is counted. So I can, and so each time, like if you look at the wrapper here, so this thing here is a kind of an entry point to the SizeLabels. So that thing see size labels main and size labels const. So I have two entry points to encrypted files. So when there is a decryption happening, that will actually enter a counter with these two GUIDs. So these GUIDs are unique. Only I know those GUIDs as a developer. Only the developer knows what those GUIDs are and what they mean. So I know that this GUID means size labels const. This GUID means size labels main. And so there is a database table somewhere that counts how many times this GUID is decrypted, how many times this GUID is decrypted, which means I have a counter for how many times my script is run. So I know how many times it's run and I know how many times it's installed, but all very anonymous. So I don't know who and I don't know where, but I can provide those things. So this is something that I hope to allow me to get some money out of Creative Developer Tools, is by offering this as a pay-for service. So if a developer is interested in tracking how their tools go and how often they're installed and how often they're run, so this is information I'll have in my database tables. But those database tables are very anonymized, so there's very little identifying information, so I can just provide counts. Now, the other thing I wanted to do is go into my size labels and show you a little bit about the stuff that I added. So this is new code, fetch embedded config. So I've written it in the fashion of writing code is something that I did like 10 years ago. So it's quite old-fashioned to me now. I write slightly different code, but I wrote this new code in the same fashion. So it fits in and it looks the same. So it's not jarring when reading it. So fetch embedded config is the thing that will actually read that INI data that is on the pasteboard. And this is all that stuff. So it's very simple. So essentially defaulting. And then there is in the Creative Developer Tools, there is some entry points that allow you to read that INI data and interpret it. There is also a pay for feature, which is to store reinstall persistent data. So I have data about how long the trial has been in progress and whether this tool has been installed before or not, and so on. So that's another feature of Creative Developer Tools that I'm currently hopefully be able to monetize, is the persistent data, reinstall persistent data, so that I can actually say like, okay, you have installed this feature before, so users would not just simply delete it and then reinstall it. That doesn't reset the countdown for the trial. So this is stuff. So here, get persist data, set persist data, that's a pay for feature. And then here another feature is to call, it's still called license, it's actually plugin installer now. So I need to rename that. Okay, so that's a difference I made. So here you have read INI. So read INI will actually use an entry point in the Creative Developer Tools ExtendScript toolkit, and that will actually allow you to interpret those very lenient INI information that might be on the pasteboard. So, and that's pretty much it. So the only changes are essentially in the handling the INI data and finding it. It's very simple. So you just find all the stories and then check if one of those stories has a lowercase size labels configuration in it. If it is, you just pass it through read INI, which makes sense of whatever is there. And then if it actually was able to make sense of some data, you can just extract that data and start using it as a JavaScript object. Right, so that's a little bit of a developer perspective on size labels, just to show how Creative Developer Tools thinks and works. So I'm still working on lots of other things. So my next target will be the code signing for CEP. So Creative Developer Tools ES will add some more features in the plugin installer to actually know how to handle CEP panels, and I'll have an installer as a packager and an installer for CEP panels. So there will be a new method which will say something like a CEP panel or something. And then we'll also have the regular manifest where we can say what needs to go into the panel and not into the panel. It will also have a standard CEP manifest that will also be mentioned in here, and so on. But that's still to come. So but the whole idea is that the plugin installer should take away all the manipulations you now need to do to get the code signing for CEP in place and the code signing for CRDT in place. All that stuff will be handled transparently. All right, that's it.